September 15th, 2024. Hundreds of people passed by the lost deaf boy wandering through downtown traffic, but not a single person stopped, until a homeless black girl with nothing to her name risked everything to pull him from the path of a speeding truck. What she discovered about the boy's identity would force an entire city to confront a question they'd been avoiding. How many invisible children are we walking past every single day? The afternoon sun beat down on Marshall Avenue, turning the asphalt into shimmering waves of heat. 12-year-old Shayla Williams crouched behind a dumpster in the alley beside Chen's grocery, her stomach growling so loudly she pressed both hands against it to muffle the sound. She'd been watching the store for 20 minutes, waiting for Mr. Chun to step away from the register long enough for her to slip inside and pocket an apple or a bag of chips. Anything to quiet the hunger that had been her constant companion for the past 3 days. Her backpack, threadbare and patched with duct tape, lay at her feet. Inside was everything she owned. A spare t-shirt, a toothbrush she'd found in a gas station bathroom, and a photograph of her mother creased down the middle from being folded and unfolded 1,000 times. Shayla touched the backpack with her sneaker, reassuring herself it was still there, still real. Across the street, the intersection of Marshall and Fifth was chaotic. Cars honked. Pedestrians surged forward during the walk signal, then scattered when it changed. A street vendor shouted about hot dogs. 2 businessmen in suits argued into their phones. Nobody looked at anyone else. Everyone moved like they were alone in the world, sealed inside invisible bubbles. That's when Shayla saw him. A boy, maybe 9 or 10 years old, stood at the edge of the crosswalk. He wore a bright red jacket that seemed too warm for September and clutched a blue backpack to his chest like it might float away. His eyes were wide, scanning the crowd with an expression Shayla recognized instantly, panic barely held in check. He took a hesitant step into the street, then jerked back when a taxi blared its horn. Shayla frowned. Something was wrong. The boy's movements were jerky, uncertain. He kept turning his head side to side as if searching for someone, but his gaze never settled. When the walk signal lit up, he didn't move with the crowd. He waited, frozen, as people streamed past him like water around a stone. Then the signal changed to red. The boy stepped off the curb. "Hey!" Shayla shouted, but her voice was lost in the roar of engines and city noise. She stood up, her heart suddenly hammering. "Kid, stop." He didn't hear her. He didn't hear anything. He walked straight into the intersection, his eyes fixed on something across the street that only he could see. A sedan swerved around him, horns screaming. A motorcycle veered left, the rider cursing. But the boy kept walking, steady and oblivious. Shayla's breath caught. From her left, she saw it. A massive delivery truck, white with blue lettering, barreling down Marshall Avenue. The driver was leaning out his window, yelling at someone, not watching the road. The truck was doing at least 50, maybe 60, and the boy in the red jacket was walking directly into its path. Time seemed to fracture. Shayla saw everything at once. The truck's chrome grille catching the sun, the boy's small hand adjusting the strap of his backpack, a woman on the sidewalk lifting her phone to take a photo of something, a pigeon flapping away from a discarded sandwich. Nobody was moving. Nobody was doing anything. "Move!" Shayla screamed. She dropped her backpack and ran. Her sneakers slapped against the pavement. The truck's engine roared louder, closer. She could see the driver now, his face twisted in shock as he finally noticed the boy. His hand went to the horn. The sound was deafening, a long, sustained blast that should have made everyone stop and look. But the boy didn't flinch. He kept walking. Shayla's lungs burned. Her legs pumped harder. She wasn't going to make it. The distance was too far, the truck too fast, her body too small and too weak from hunger. Mathematical certainty crashed over her. She would fail. The boy would die, and she would have to watch it happen. But her legs didn't stop. She hit the intersection at full speed, weaving between cars that had screeched to a halt. A man in a blue Honda was shouting something. A woman stood with her hand over her mouth, frozen in horror. Shayla ignored them all. She focused on the boy, on the 3 feet between him and safety, on the rapidly shrinking space between him and the truck's front bumper. 2 seconds. That's all she had. She launched herself forward, arms outstretched. Her shoulder collided with the boy's side, and she wrapped her arms around him as momentum carried them both forward. They tumbled together, a tangle of limbs and fabric. Shayla felt the heat of the truck's engine as it roared past, felt the rush of air that yanked at her hair and clothes. Then everything went still. She lay on the asphalt, her chest heaving, her arms still locked around the boy. The truck had missed them by inches, maybe less. She could smell burning rubber and exhaust fumes. Her elbow throbbed where she'd scraped it against the ground, and her shoulder felt like it had been hit with a hammer. The boy pushed against her, trying to sit up. Shayla released him and rolled onto her back, staring up at the sky. It was so blue it hurt to look at. Her ears rang from the truck's horn, or maybe from adrenaline, or maybe from the absolute silence that had settled over the intersection. Then the noise came rushing back. Car doors opening, footsteps running, voices overlapping in a confused chorus. What happened? Did you see that? That girl just... Is he okay? Someone call 911. Shayla sat up slowly. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to press them flat against the pavement to steady them. The boy was sitting next to her, his red jacket dusty but intact. He looked at her with dark brown eyes that were impossibly calm, impossibly sad. His lips moved, forming words without sound. Then he lifted his hands and began to sign. Shayla stared at him, at the rapid, fluid movements of his fingers, at the desperate hope in his expression. She didn't understand sign language. She didn't know what he was trying to tell her, but she understood the look on his face, the look of someone who had been shouting into a void for so long that he'd almost forgotten what it felt like to be heard. I don't, she started to say, but her voice cracked. I don't know what you're saying. The boy's hands fell to his lap. His shoulders slumped, and for just a moment, Shayla saw something in his eyes that looked exactly like what she felt every single day. Invisible. Around them, the crowd pressed closer. But nobody was looking at the boy. They were all looking at her. 3 hours earlier, Shayla had woken up on a bench in Riverside Park with dew soaking through her jacket. The morning joggers had pretended not to see her as they passed, their expensive sneakers pounding the path in rhythm. She'd learned that invisibility was a skill the houses had perfected. They could look directly at you and somehow see nothing at all. She'd folded her jacket carefully, using it as a pillow for her backpack, and walked the 6 blocks to the public library. The librarian, Mrs. Patterson, was one of the few adults who treated Shayla like a person instead of a problem. She never asked questions when Shayla spent hours in the bathroom washing up, never commented on the fact that she wore the same clothes 3 days in a row. Morning, Shayla, Mrs. Patterson had said, sliding a granola bar across the counter. This was extra from my breakfast. It wasn't extra. Shayla knew that, but she'd taken it anyway, because pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. Thank you, ma'am. The library had been Shayla's sanctuary for the past 2 months, ever since her mother had disappeared. Not dead, disappeared. One day Mama had been there, working double shifts at the textile factory and coming home smelling like industrial detergent and exhaustion. The next day she was gone. No note, no explanation, just an eviction notice taped to their apartment door and a social worker with kind eyes and cruel solutions. Foster care is temporary, the social worker had said, just until we locate your mother. But Shayla had heard the stories. She'd seen what happened to kids who went into the system, how they got shuffled from house to house, how they learned to pack their lives into garbage bags, how they stopped expecting anyone to remember their names. So when the social worker had turned to fill out paperwork, Shayla had run. That was 8 weeks ago. 8 weeks of sleeping in parks and doorways, of stealing food and avoiding police, of becoming a shadow in a city full of people who had mastered the art of not seeing. The library closed at noon on Sundays, which is how Shayla had ended up behind the dumpster at Chen's grocery, hungry enough to risk getting caught. Mr. Chun wasn't a bad man, but he'd chased her away twice before, and she knew he'd call the cops if he saw her stealing again. She'd been weighing her options, apple or chips, quick grab or careful approach, when she'd seen the boy in the red jacket. Now, sitting on the curb with paramedics swarming around them, Shayla watched as 2 EMTs tried to communicate with him. The boy kept signing, his hands moving in quick, frustrated gestures. One paramedic spoke slowly and loudly, as if volume could somehow bridge the gap between sound and silence. Can you tell us your name? Where are your parents? The boy's face crumpled. He signed something sharp and desperate, then pointed down the street, then signed again. His meaning was clear even without words. He was lost. He'd been lost for a while, and nobody had stopped to help. Does anyone here know sign language? The paramedic called out to the crowd that had gathered. Silence. People shifted on their feet, looked at their phones, and found reasons to drift away. Shayla felt something hot and angry coil in her chest. All these adults with their fancy watches and their important jobs, and not one of them could help a scared kid. A police officer approached, notebook in hand. He was young, with red hair and a sunburn across his nose. I'm Officer Brady. Can anyone tell me what happened here? A dozen voices erupted at once, each person eager to narrate the drama now that the danger had passed. The woman who'd been taking photos showed the officer her phone screen. I got the whole thing on video. That girl came out of nowhere. Officer Brady's eyes found Shayla. Is that right? You pulled him out of the way. Shayla nodded, suddenly aware of how she must look. Dirty clothes, scraped elbow bleeding through her torn sleeve. No adult standing protectively beside her. She was exactly the kind of kid people crossed the street to avoid. That was very brave, Officer Brady said, and he sounded like he meant it. What's your name? Shayla. Shayla what? She hesitated. Giving her full name meant entering the system, meant being found, meant losing the small freedom she'd fought so hard to keep. But lying to a cop seemed like a fast track to making things worse. Williams. Shayla Williams. Officer Brady wrote it down. And where are your parents, Shayla? There it was. The question that split her world into before and after. My mom's. She's working. It wasn't technically a lie. Mama could be working somewhere. She could be in another city, in another state, building a new life where eviction notices and broken promises couldn't reach her. Shayla had to believe that because the alternative that something terrible had happened was too heavy to carry. Officer Brady's expression shifted into something that looked like pity. Shayla hated that look. Working where? Before she could answer, one of the paramedics interrupted. Officer, we need to transport the boy to the county general. He's uninjured, but we can't get any information from him, and he's clearly distressed. The boy's eyes went wide with fear. He grabbed Shayla's hand, his grip surprisingly strong. His other hand moved in frantic signs, and even though she couldn't understand the words, she understood the meaning. Don't leave me. He's scared, Shayla said. Can I go with him? Just until you find his parents. Officer Brady exchanged a glance with the paramedics. You're a minor yourself. We'd need to contact your guardian. Please. The word came out smaller than she intended. He saved my life once. It was a lie, but it was the kind of lie that felt true. Because in a way, the boy had saved her. For 8 weeks, Shayla had been invisible, had moved through the city like a ghost nobody could touch. But when she'd run into that intersection, when she'd wrapped her arms around a stranger and refused to let go, she'd become real again, solid, someone who mattered enough to remember. Officer Brady sighed. All right, but just until we get this sorted out. The ambulance ride was strange and quiet. The boy sat on the stretcher, still clutching his blue backpack. Shayla sat on the bench across from him, watching as he stared out the window at the city sliding past. She wondered what it was like to live in silence, to see mouths moving and know that meaning was happening but being locked out of it. She thought about her mother's last words to her. I'll be back before dinner. Be good. 7 words. The last sound of her mother's voice. If Shayla had known they would be the last, would she have listened harder? Would she have memorized the exact pitch and rhythm, stored them away like treasures? The boy turned to look at her. His eyes were dark brown, almost black, and they held a sadness that seemed too large for someone so young. He lifted his hands and signed something slow and deliberate. Shayla shook her head. I'm sorry. I don't understand. The boy reached into his backpack and pulled out a small notebook and a pencil. He wrote carefully, his letters neat and precise, then held it up for her to see. Thank you for seeing me. Shayla's throat tightened. She took the notebook and wrote beneath his words. I'm Shayla. What's your name? The boy smiled for the first time, and it transformed his entire face. He wrote quickly, almost eagerly. Marcus. Marcus Chun. Chun. Like the grocery store. Shayla thought of Mr. Chun behind his register, thought of all the times she'd watched the store, and wondered if she'd ever seen this boy, if he'd been there all along, one more invisible child in a city that had perfected the art of not seeing. County General Hospital smelled like bleach and fear. Shayla had been inside once before, 3 years ago, when Mama had gotten pneumonia so bad she could barely breathe. That time, they had insurance cards and a fixed address. This time, Shayla had nothing but the clothes on her back and a boy who couldn't hear clinging to her hand. The intake nurse, a heavy-set woman with glasses on a chain, barely looked up from her computer. Names? Marcus Chun, Shayla said. He can't hear. He's deaf. The nurse's fingers paused over the keyboard. Her eyes flicked to Marcus, then to Shayla, then to the police officer who'd followed them inside. And you are? Shayla Williams. I'm with him. Relation. Friend. The nurse's expression hardened into something Shayla recognized. The look adults got when they decided you were lying. Does he have any ID? Insurance card? Parent contact information? Marcus clutched his backpack tighter. Shayla gently touched his shoulder and held out her hand. He hesitated, then unzipped the bag and pulled out a laminated card. It had his photo, his name, and an address in the Riverside district, the wealthy part of town where houses had 3-car garages and security systems. The nurse copied the information, her eyebrows rising slightly. This address is in Riverside. Yes, ma'am. And how did a boy from Riverside end up downtown with no adult supervision? I don't know, Shayla said honestly. He was lost. Nobody was helping him. Officer Brady stepped forward. I'm going to call the address on file. In the meantime, can someone examine both children? The girl has injuries from the incident. The nurse sighed as if the entire situation was a personal inconvenience. Wait here. They sat in the emergency room for 40 minutes. Shayla watched the clock on the wall tick forward while Marcus drew pictures in his notebook. A house, a tree, a car, a woman with long hair. Each drawing was carefully detailed, and each one made his shoulders sink a little lower. When the doctor finally called them back, she was young with kind eyes and a stethoscope covered in cartoon characters. I'm Dr. Reeves. Let's take a look at that arm, sweetheart. She cleaned Shayla's scraped elbow with gentle efficiency, applied antibiotic ointment, and wrapped it in gauze. You're very brave. That was quite a thing you did. Is Marcus okay? Shayla asked. Physically, he's fine. Emotionally, Dr. Reeves glanced at Marcus, who sat on the examination table swinging his legs. He's terrified. Do you know how long he's been lost? No, ma'am. Dr. Reeves lowered her voice. The officer called the number on his ID card. It's disconnected. We're running the address through the system, but... She trailed off and Shayla understood. The system was slow. The system didn't care about one lost deaf boy when there were gunshot wounds and heart attacks demanding attention. Can I stay with him? Shayla asked. Until someone comes. Dr. Reeves studied her for a long moment. Where are your parents, Shayla? There it was again. The question that exposed her, that threatened to tear apart the fragile safety she'd built. My mom's at work. What's her number? We should call her. Shayla's mind raced. She couldn't give her real history, couldn't admit that she'd been sleeping in parks and stealing food, that she had no guardian to call. But she also couldn't lie well enough to fool a doctor who'd clearly seen through tougher acts than hers. She doesn't have a phone right now. It got shut off. Dr. Reeves's expression shifted into something that looked like understanding, which was somehow worse than suspicion. Shayla, I need to be honest with you. If we can't reach your parent or guardian, we're required to contact Child Protective Services. It's the law. The words hit like a fist to the stomach. Child Protective Services. Foster care. The system that would separate her from the last shreds of the life she'd known. that would assign her a case number and a temporary bed and a social worker who'd forget her name within a week. "Please," Shayla whispered. "I can't. I just need to make sure Marcus is okay. Then I'll go. I promise." Dr. Reeves touched her shoulder gently. "Wait here." After she left, Marcus tugged on Shayla's sleeve. He'd been watching the exchange with worried eyes, reading the tension even if he couldn't hear the words. He wrote in his notebook and held it up. "You're scared. Why?" Shayla took the notebook with shaking hands. How could she explain? How could she tell him that helping him might cost her everything? That kindness was a luxury she couldn't afford, that she was just as lost as he was. She wrote, "I'm okay. Don't worry about me." Marcus shook his head firmly. He took the notebook back and wrote in large letters, "Liar." Despite everything, Shayla almost smiled. The boy might not be able to hear, but he could see straight through her. Before she could respond, Officer Brady returned with a woman in a gray pantsuit. She had short hair and carried a leather folder that screamed official business. Her eyes landed on Shayla with the precision of someone trained to assess and categorize. "Shayla Williams?" the woman asked. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Janet Foster, Child Protective Services. I understand you've been very helpful today, but I need to ask you some questions. Where is your mother currently?" Shayla's mouth went dry. "She's working." "Where does she work?" The textile factory. On Broad Street." "And your home address?" Shayla recited the address of the apartment they'd been evicted from, hoping somehow that would be enough, that this woman wouldn't dig deeper and wouldn't discover the truth. Ms. Foster wrote everything down with mechanical efficiency. "I'm going to verify this information. In the meantime, you'll need to wait here." As she walked away, Marcus grabbed Shayla's hand. His grip was tight, desperate. He didn't need to write anything. His fear was written all over his face. He'd already lost his family once today. He couldn't bear to lose the one person who'd bothered to see him. An hour passed. Then two. The emergency room filled with new patients. A construction worker with a broken finger. A little girl with a fever. An elderly man clutching his chest. The staff moved around Shayla and Marcus like they were furniture, present but unremarkable. Ms. Foster returned with Officer Brady. Her expression was carefully neutral, which Shayla had learned was never a good sign. "Shayla, the address you gave me shows an eviction from 2 months ago. The textile factory has no record of employing anyone named Williams in the past year. And there's a missing person report filed by the school system for Shayla Williams, who stopped attending 6 weeks ago." The words hung in the air like an indictment. Shayla felt Marcus's hand tighten around hers. She wanted to run, to disappear into the city the way she'd been disappearing for weeks. But Marcus's grip anchored her in place. "I'm going to have to take you into protective custody," Ms. Foster continued. "We'll find a placement for you tonight. And no." The word came out louder than Shayla intended. "I'm not leaving Marcus. Not until his family comes. Sweetheart, that's not your decision to make. He's scared. He doesn't know anyone here. I'm the only person who—" Her voice cracked. "I'm the only person who can help him." Miss Foster's expression softened slightly, but her resolve didn't waver. "I understand this is difficult, but you're a child yourself. You need care and supervision. Marcus will be placed with someone who can communicate with him properly." "There isn't anyone," Officer Brady interjected quietly. "We've been calling around. No sign language interpreters available until tomorrow morning at the earliest." Ms. Foster frowned. "Then we'll make do until then. But Shayla still needs to come with me." Marcus suddenly stood up on the examination table. His hands moved in rapid, angry signs. Gestures so sharp and emphatic that everyone in the room stopped to watch. He pointed at Shayla, then at himself, then made a gesture that needed no translation. Together. Dr. Reeves appeared in the doorway. "Ms. Foster, could I speak with you privately?" They stepped into the hallway. Through the window, Shayla could see them talking, see Dr. Reeves gesturing, and see Ms. Foster shaking her head. When they returned, Ms. Foster's expression had shifted into resignation. "Against my better judgment," she said, Dr. Reeves has suggested that we allow you to stay with Marcus for tonight. Just tonight. But you'll be under hospital supervision, and first thing tomorrow morning we're finding you a proper placement. Understood. Shayla nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Relief and dread warred in her chest. She'd bought Marcus one more night, but tomorrow the system would swallow them both. Marcus climbed down from the table and wrapped his arms around Shayla's waist. She hugged him back, feeling the trembling in his small frame, feeling the weight of responsibility settle over her shoulders like a cloak she hadn't asked for but couldn't refuse. The morning sun streamed through the hospital window, painting everything in shades of gold that felt too hopeful for what the day would bring. Shayla had barely slept, her body curled in the stiff chair beside Marcus's bed. Every time she'd closed her eyes, she'd seen Miss Foster's face, heard the words protective custody, felt the future closing in like a trap. Marcus stirred, his eyes blinking open. For a moment, confusion crossed his face. Where was he? Why was he here? Then he saw Shayla and relaxed. He signed something, a gentle motion that looked like a greeting. Shayla managed a small smile. Morning. He reached for his notebook, but before he could write anything, the door opened. Dr. Reeves entered with a man Shayla had never seen before. Tall, Chinese-American, wearing an expensive suit that looked out of place in the sterile hospital room. His eyes scanned the space until they landed on Marcus. The man's face transformed. Relief, joy, and anguish crashed together in an expression so raw it hurt to witness. Marcus! He breathed. Marcus's head whipped around. His eyes went wide, and then he was scrambling out of bed, his hands moving in rapid signs. The man dropped to his knees, catching Marcus in an embrace so tight Shayla thought they might both break. The man's shoulders shook. He was crying, Shayla realized. This powerful-looking man in his expensive suit was sobbing into Marcus's red jacket, his hands moving in signs that Marcus returned with equal fervor. Their conversation was silent but intense, hands flying, faces expressing everything words couldn't capture. Dr. Reeves touched Shayla's shoulder gently. That's David Chin, Marcus's uncle. He's been searching for Marcus for almost 18 hours. 18 hours. Shayla's mind struggled with the number. It felt like she'd known Marcus forever, like their lives had been connected for much longer than a single day and night. David Chin finally pulled back, his hands cupping Marcus's face as he examined him for injuries. His eyes were red-rimmed, his usually composed features cracked with emotion. Then he turned to Shayla, and his expression shifted into something profound as he stood, crossing the room in 3 strides. Before Shayla could react, he knelt in front of her chair, bringing himself to her eye level. His hands moved in signs she didn't understand. Then he seemed to remember himself and switched to speech. You saved him. His voice was thick with emotion. You saved my nephew's life. Shayla shook her head. Anyone would have. No. David's voice was firm. No one else did. The police showed me the footage. Dozens of people walked past him. Dozens. But you saw him. You ran into traffic for a child you didn't know. He paused, his eyes searching hers. Why? The question hung in the air. Why had she done it? She could have stayed behind the dumpster, could have let the world handle its own problems the way it had let her handle hers. She could have looked away like everyone else. Because he was invisible, Shayla said quietly. And I know what that feels like. Something shifted in David's expression. Understanding, recognition, a connection that transcended the obvious differences between them. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and placed his hand over hers. Thank you, he said. Thank you for seeing my boy. Behind him, Marcus tugged on his uncle's sleeve. He signed something urgent, pointing at Shayla. David's eyebrows rose. He responded in sign, Marcus signed back more emphatically, and then both of them were looking at Shayla with identical expressions of concern. Marcus says they're trying to take you away, David said. That someone from Child Services is coming this morning. Shayla's throat tightened. It's fine. I'll be okay. Marcus shook his head violently. He grabbed his notebook and wrote in large, angry letters. No, not okay. Help her. David read the note, then looked at Shayla with new understanding. "Where are your parents?" And there it was again. The question she couldn't answer. The truth she couldn't hide anymore. Shayla felt tears burning behind her eyes. "My mom, she's gone. I don't know where. And I don't have anyone else." "How long have you been alone?" 8 weeks. David's jaw tightened. He stood, pulling out his phone, and stepped into the hallway. Through the window, Shayla could see him pacing, talking rapidly into the phone. His free hand moved in emphatic gestures, his expression cycling through anger, determination, and something that looked like fierce protectiveness. Marcus climbed back onto the bed beside Shayla, wrapping his small hand around hers. He wrote in the notebook, "Uncle David helps people. He's good at it." "What does he do?" Shayla asked. Marcus drew a picture, a tall building, a desk, a gavel. When Shayla looked confused, he wrote, "Lawyer. He fights for people. A lawyer." Shayla's heart sank even as a small flame of hope flickered to life. Lawyers meant courtrooms and legal battles, things that took time and money she didn't have. But it also meant someone who understood the system, someone who might know how to navigate the maze that had trapped her. David returned 15 minutes later with Dr. Reeves and another woman, younger Asian American, with an efficient air and a tablet tucked under her arm. "Shayla," David said, "this is Linda Park. She's a social worker, but she works for my law firm, not the county. I've asked her to look into your case." Ms. Park smiled warmly. "Hi, Shayla. I understand you've been through quite an ordeal. I'd like to help if you'll let me." "I don't have money for a lawyer," Shayla said quietly. "You don't need money," David said firmly. "You saved Marcus. That makes you family. And we take care of our family." The word family hit Shayla like a physical force. She'd spent 8 weeks believing she had no one, that she was completely alone in the world. And now this man, this stranger whose nephew she'd known for less than 24 hours, was calling her family. "I don't understand," Shayla whispered. David pulled up a chair and sat down. "Let me tell you about Marcus. 2 days ago, my sister, his mother, and her husband were in a car accident. They're both in intensive care at Memorial Hospital across town. Marcus was supposed to be with his grandmother, but she had a heart episode and was rushed to the hospital too. In the confusion, Marcus slipped out. He was trying to find his parents. Marcus's drawing suddenly made sense. The house, the car, the woman with long hair. He'd been searching for his family, wandering the city alone, unable to ask for help because no one bothered to learn his language. "He walked for miles," David continued, "through neighborhoods, past police stations, past hundreds of people who could have stopped to help. But they didn't see him. They saw a deaf kid, a problem, something to avoid. Until you." David's voice broke slightly. "You risked your life for him. You stayed with him even when it would have been easier to walk away. You protected him when the system tried to separate you. That kind of courage, that kind of compassion. It's rare. And it's exactly what our family values most." "I still don't understand what you're saying," Shayla said, though her heart was beginning to race with something that felt dangerously like hope. Park spoke up. "Mr. Chun is requesting emergency kinship guardianship. He wants to become your legal guardian while we search for your mother." The room tilted. "What? It's not permanent unless you want it to be," Ms. Park said gently. "But it would keep you out of foster care, give you stability while we sort things out. You'd live with Mr. Chun and Marcus, attend school, and have support. And if we find your mother, we can transition you back to her care." "Why would you do this?" Shayla asked, looking at David. "You don't know me." "I know enough," David said simply. "I know you're brave. I know you're kind. I know you protected my nephew when no one else would. And I know what it's like to be alone and scared." His expression softened. "I was 11 when my family came to America. We had nothing. But someone helped us. A teacher who saw that I was more than just a poor immigrant kid. She changed my life. Now I have the chance to do the same for you." Marcus signed something and David smiled. "Marcus says you're not alone anymore. He says you're his sister now." Tears spilled down Shayla's cheeks. She'd cried more in the past day than she had in the entire 8 weeks she'd been on the streets. But these tears were different. They weren't born from fear or hunger or despair. They were born from the overwhelming, terrifying, beautiful possibility that maybe, just maybe, she'd been seen. Not just noticed, but truly seen. "I don't know what to say," Shayla whispered. David smiled. "Say yes." Before Shayla could respond, the door opened. Miss Foster walked in, her leather folder under her arm, her expression set for official business. She stopped short when she saw David. "Mr. Chun, I wasn't expecting you." "Janet." David's voice shifted into something professional and commanding. "I filed emergency guardianship papers for Shayla Williams. Linda has all the documentation. I understand you were planning to place her in foster care, but that won't be necessary." Miss Foster's eyebrows rose. "Mr. Chun, while I appreciate your concern, these matters require careful evaluation. We can't simply—" "I'm not asking for special treatment," David said calmly. "I'm following proper legal channels. I have a stable home, a clean background check, and the financial means to provide proper care. More importantly, I have a nephew who trusts Shayla and a family who wants to honor what she did for us. The paperwork is in order, unless you have legal grounds to object." Miss Foster looked at her folder, then at David, then at Shayla and Marcus sitting side by side on the hospital bed. Her expression was unreadable. "I'll need to review the paperwork," she said finally. "But if everything is in order—" She trailed off, then added more softly, "It's good that she has someone. These cases don't usually end this well." After Miss Foster left, the room felt lighter, as if some invisible weight had been lifted. David turned to Shayla, his expression open and genuine. "This is real," he said. "If you want it, you have a home, you have a family, and you'll never be invisible again." Marcus grabbed Shayla's hand and squeezed. His eyes were bright with hope and certainty. He didn't need words to communicate what he was feeling. It was written all over his face. Shayla looked at this boy she'd known for less than a day, at this man who was offering her a future she'd stopped believing was possible. She thought about her mother, wherever she was, and sent up a silent wish that someday they'd find each other again. But for now, at this moment, she had something she desperately needed. She had people who saw her. "Yes," Shayla whispered. "Yes." The Chen house sat on a tree-lined street in Riverside, the kind of neighborhood Shayla had only ever seen through car windows. Places where lawns were manicured, mailboxes matched, and children rode bikes without looking over their shoulders. When David's car pulled into the driveway, Shayla pressed her face to the window, taking in the 2-story brick home with white shutters and a porch swing that moved gently in the breeze. "This is where you live?" she whispered. David smiled. "This is where we live now. All of us." Marcus was already unbuckling his seatbelt, grabbing Shayla's hand to pull her from the car. His excitement was contagious, his hands singing rapidly as he showed her the garden his mother had planted, the basketball hoop his father had installed, the spot under the oak tree where he liked to read. Inside, the house smelled like jasmine and old books. Hardwood floors gleamed under soft lighting. Framed photographs lined the hallway. Family dinners, birthday parties. Marcus at various ages, always with that same serious expression that occasionally broke into radiant smiles. "Your room is upstairs," David said, leading her up a staircase with a polished banister. "It was my sister's office, but we converted it this morning." He opened a door to reveal a space that took Shayla's breath away. A bed with a white comforter and more pillows than one person could possibly need. A desk by the window overlooking the backyard. A bookshelf already stocked with novels. A dresser with the drawers slightly open, revealing neatly folded clothes in what looked like her size. "How did you—" Shayla's voice trailed off. "Linda helped," David said. "We guessed on sizes. If anything doesn't fit, we'll exchange it. And if you want to redecorate, change the colors, add posters, whatever makes it feel like yours, we'll make it happen." Shayla set her backpack down. Her old, duct-taped backpack that held everything she'd owned for 8 weeks, and it looked painfully out of place in this clean, beautiful room. She touched the comforter tentatively, as if it might disappear. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted quietly. "How to be in a family again." David leaned against the doorframe. "Neither do I, honestly. Marcus and I have been bachelors for a while now. We eat cereal for dinner sometimes and forget to do laundry until we're out of clean socks. But we'll figure it out together. That's what families do." That evening, they ordered pizza, something Shayla hadn't tasted in months. They ate at the kitchen table, Marcus teaching her basic signs between bites. "Thank you, please, more, delicious." Shayla's hands felt clumsy forming the shapes, but Marcus was patient, demonstrating again and again until she got it right. After dinner, David showed her how to work the washing machine. "You can wash your clothes whenever you need to. No permission required. This is your home. Your home." The words felt foreign in Shayla's mouth, like a language she'd forgotten how to speak. But slowly, over the following days, they began to feel more natural. The first week was a blur of adjustment. Linda Park came by twice to check on Shayla's transition, bringing more clothes, school supplies, and paperwork for enrollment at Riverside Middle School. Miss Foster visited once, her expression softer than it had been at the hospital, and signed off on the temporary guardianship arrangement. "You landed on your feet, kid," she said before leaving. "Not everyone does." David set up a routine: breakfast at 7, school by 8, homework after dinner, bedtime by 9:30. At first, the structure felt suffocating after months of living minute to minute, making decisions based solely on survival. But gradually, Shayla began to appreciate the rhythm. She didn't have to wonder where her next meal would come from or where she'd sleep that night. The uncertainty that had defined her existence was replaced with something she'd almost forgotten: stability. Marcus became her constant companion and interpreter. He taught her more sign language every day, his patience endless as she struggled with fingerspelling and complex concepts. In return, she helped him with his homework, read aloud to him. He liked to watch her lips and feel the vibration of her voice, and defended him from the curious stares of other kids in the neighborhood who didn't understand why he didn't respond when they called his name. One afternoon, 3 weeks after moving in, Shayla walked to the library, not to hide or wash up in the bathroom, but to return books David had checked out for her. Mrs. Patterson looked up from the circulation desk and her eyes widened with recognition. "Shayla? Oh my goodness, honey." She came around the desk and pulled Shayla into a hug. "I was so worried about you. You just disappeared." "I'm okay now," Shayla said, and realized with surprise that she meant it. "I have a home." Mrs. Patterson's eyes glistened. "I'm so glad. You deserve that. You deserve so much more than what life has given you." "Life's giving me more now," Shayla said quietly. "I just had to hold on long enough to find it." School was harder to adjust to. Riverside Middle was nothing like the underfunded public school she'd attended before. Here, the lockers didn't stick, the textbooks weren't falling apart, and the cafeteria served actual meals instead of processed mystery meat. But it also meant being the new kid, the scholarship case, the girl everyone whispered about because they'd seen the news coverage of her rescue. "That's her," she heard a girl say in the bathroom one day. "The one who saved that deaf kid from getting hit by a truck." "I heard she was homeless," another voice added. "Living in parks and stuff. That's so sad. But it's also kind of cool that she's like a hero now." Shayla hid in the stall until they left, her face burning. She didn't want to be known as the homeless girl or the hero. She just wanted to be normal, to blend in, to stop being defined by the worst and best moments of her life. Marcus sensed her discomfort. During lunch, he sat with her in the courtyard. Him at the deaf and hard of hearing table, her as the only hearing student who chose to sit there. The other deaf students welcomed her, once they learned she was learning ASL, teaching her new signs and laughing when she accidentally signed something inappropriate. "You told them I said what?" Shayla demanded after Marcus dissolved into silent giggles. He signed slowly, spelling out the correct phrase versus what she'd actually signed. The difference was mortifying, but slowly the stares decreased. The whispers faded. Shayla became just another student, another kid navigating the complicated social dynamics of middle school. She joined the art club, discovered she had a talent for drawing, and even made a friend, A girl named Kira who didn't ask about her past and just wanted someone to sit with during lunch. 2 months in, David sat her down in the living room. "I wanted to talk to you about your mother." Shayla's heart clenched. "Did you find her?" "Not yet. But Linda has been working with a private investigator. We're following every lead." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I want you to know that finding her is a priority. You deserve to know what happened, to have closure or reunion, whichever comes. But I also want you to know that regardless of what we find, you'll always have a place here. This isn't temporary unless you want it to be." Tears pricked Shayla's eyes. "What if she doesn't want me back? What if she left because I was in too much trouble?" David shook his head firmly. "That's not true, and you know it. Whatever happened to your mother, whatever circumstances led to her disappearance, it wasn't because of you. You are not too much. You are not a burden. You are a brave, kind, remarkable young woman who deserves to be loved and protected." The words settled over Shayla like a warm blanket. She'd spent so long believing she was invisible, unimportant, easy to discard. But David saw her differently. Marcus saw her differently. And slowly, she was beginning to see herself differently too. That night, Marcus knocked on her door. He'd started doing that, a courtesy he'd learned from David, respecting boundaries and privacy. When she opened it, he held out his notebook. "You're not sad anymore. Your eyes are different." Shayla smiled. "Yeah, I think I'm healing." Marcus nodded seriously, then wrote again. "Good, because you helped me heal too. We saved each other." It was true, Shayla realized. She'd pulled him from the path of that truck, but he'd pulled her from a different kind of danger. The slow death of believing you didn't matter, that no one would notice if you disappeared. 3 months after moving in, David took them both to visit Marcus's parents at the rehabilitation center. They were awake now, recovering slowly from their injuries. Marcus's mother, Sarah, was in a wheelchair, her leg in a cast. His father, James, had a brace on his neck but could move his arms enough to sign. When Sarah saw Shayla, tears streamed down her face. She signed something to Marcus, who translated with his notebook. "Mom says thank you for protecting her baby. She says you're part of our family forever now." Shayla knelt beside the wheelchair. "He protected me too. He gave me a reason to be brave." Sarah reached out with her good hand and cupped Shayla's face. The gesture was so maternal, so much like something Mama used to do, that Shayla nearly broke down. But she held it together, returning the smile, accepting the love being offered. On the drive home, with Marcus dozing in the back seat, David glanced at Shayla. "You're different from that scared girl in the hospital. Stronger." "I had help," Shayla said. "I had people who refused to let me be invisible." "You were never invisible," David said quietly. "You were just waiting for people to open their eyes." That night, Shayla stood in her room, and looked at the reflection in the mirror. The girl staring back had clean clothes, clear eyes, and shoulders that didn't hunch with the weight of survival. She looked like someone who belonged somewhere. For the first time in months, Shayla believed she did. 6 months after that September afternoon on Marshall Avenue, Shayla stood at the same intersection where everything had changed. The traffic lights cycled through its familiar rhythm. Red, yellow, green. And the city moved around her with the same indifferent energy it always had. But she was different now. And so was the world, in small but significant ways. David stood beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. Marcus held her other hand, his grip warm and certain. They'd come here together, the three of them, because Shayla had asked to see the place again. Not to relive the trauma, but to honor what had been born there. "This is where I stopped being invisible," Shayla said quietly. David squeezed her shoulder. "You were never invisible, Shayla. The world was just blind." Across the street, a new sign had been installed at the crosswalk, bright, with clear symbols and a visual timer that counted down the seconds. Below it, a smaller plaque read, "Marcus's Crossing. See every child." It was David's doing, funded through his law firm's community initiative. A small change, but one that might save another lost child someday. Marcus signed something, and Shayla translated aloud, her ASL now fluent enough to keep pace with his thoughts. He says we should go to the grocery store. Mr. Chun wants to see us. They walked the 3 blocks to Chen's grocery, the same store where Shayla had once crouched behind a dumpster, hungry and desperate. Now she walked through the front door with her head high, the bell chiming to announce their arrival. Mr. Chun looked up from behind the register, his weathered face breaking into a smile. Shayla, Marcus, and David, good to see you. Uncle, David said with a slight bow. The connection had been distant before. Mr. Chun was David's father's cousin, but the rescue had brought the family closer, and had reminded them that blood meant something. Mr. Chun came around the counter and placed his hands on Shayla's shoulders. Every day I think about what you did. Every day I am grateful. I just did what anyone should do, Shayla said. But no one else did, Mr. Chun replied firmly. That is what makes you special. Not the act itself, but the willingness to act when others looked away. He pressed a bag into her hands, her favorite snacks, the ones she used to steal out of desperation. Now given freely with love. For you. Always. As they left the store, Shayla's phone buzzed. A text from Linda Park. News. Call me. Her heart raced. For months, the private investigator had been chasing leads about her mother. Dead ends, mostly trails that went cold. But Linda's tone suggested something different this time. David saw her expression change. What is it? Linda wants me to call her. About my mom. They found a bench in the small park where Shayla had once slept, where she'd shared an apple with a stray dog and wondered if anyone would remember her. Now Marcus sat close while David stepped away to give her privacy as she dialed. Shayla. Linda's voice was gentle. We found her. The world tilted. Is she alive? She's alive. She's in Minnesota. She'd been working at a factory there, sending money back to pay off the debt from your eviction. But she had a mental health crisis, severe depression, and ended up in a treatment facility. She's been trying to find you ever since she was released last month. Tears streamed down Shayla's face. She was looking for me? She never stopped. She filed missing person reports, contacted every shelter, every agency. She thought you'd been taken by the system. She had no idea you'd run. Can I talk to her? She's on a bus right now. She'll be here tomorrow. Tomorrow. After 6 months of wondering, of fearing the worst, of learning to build a life without her mother. Tomorrow, they would be reunited. That night, Shayla couldn't sleep. She sat in her room, looking at the photograph she'd carried for so long. The one of her and Mama at the county fair, both of them laughing, both of them whole. Tomorrow that picture would become three-dimensional again, would step out of frozen memory into uncertain reality. Marcus knocked softly and entered. He'd become attuned to her moods, could sense when she needed company. He sat beside her on the bed and signed. Scared? Terrified, Shayla admitted. What if she's different? What if I'm different? What if we can't go back to how things were? Marcus considered this, then wrote in his ever-present notebook. You can't go back. Only forward. But going forward together is better than going backward alone. His wisdom, earned through his own trauma and recovery, settled over her like a blessing. The next afternoon, Shayla waited at the bus station with David and Marcus flanking her like sentries. When the Greyhound pulled in, her heart hammered so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Passengers disembarked, business people, college students, families. And then she saw her, Mama, thinner than before, with new lines around her eyes and gray threading through her black hair. But unmistakably, undeniably her mother. Their eyes met across the distance. For one suspended moment, neither moved. Then Mama dropped her bag and ran. Shayla met her halfway, and they collided in an embrace that felt like coming home and leaving home all at once. Mama's hands cupped her face, her eyes searching, cataloging every change. Baby, my baby, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I know, Mama, I know. They held each other while the world moved around them. Buses arriving and departing, strangers rushing to their own reunions and farewells. But in that moment, Shayla understood something profound. She could love her mother and love her new family. She could honor her past and embrace her future. She could be both the girl who had survived alone and the girl who had learned to accept help. Later, at a coffee shop, Mama met David and Marcus. There was awkwardness, yes, the complexity of gratitude mixed with the pain of absence. But there was also grace. David explained the guardianship arrangement, made clear that Shayla's well-being was paramount, that whatever came next would be Shayla's choice. "I can't take her from what you've built," Mama said, tears streaming. "She's thriving. She's safe. That's all I ever wanted." "She can have both," David said simply. "Shared custody. 2 homes. Double the family. We're not trying to replace you. We're trying to support her." Over the following weeks, they built something new. Not the life they'd had before. Not the life Shayla had found without her mother, but a third option that honored all of it. Shayla spent weekdays with David and Marcus, weekends with her mother who'd found an apartment nearby and a job at a community center. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever was, but it was theirs. 3 months later, David's law firm launched the See Every Child Initiative, a program that trained teachers, police officers, and community members in basic sign language and awareness for children with disabilities or in crisis. Marcus became the face of the campaign, his story, and Shayla's, inspiring hundreds to look closer, to see the invisible children in their midst. Shayla spoke at the launch event, her voice steady as she addressed the crowd. "6 months ago, I was invisible. So was Marcus. We were 2 children that society had decided didn't matter enough to see. But one moment of attention, one choice to act instead of look away, changed everything. Not just for us, but for everyone connected to us." She looked at Marcus, who signed encouragement from the front row. At David, whose eyes shone with pride. At Mama, who sat with her hands clasped over her heart. At Mrs. Patterson from the library, at Mr. Chun from the store, at Officer Brady who'd responded that day, at Dr. Reeves who'd advocated for them at the hospital. "We're all connected," Shayla continued. "Every child you pass on the street, every person struggling that you pretend not to see, they're someone's Marcus, someone's Shayla, and you have the power to change their story just by opening your eyes." The crowd erupted in applause, but Shayla barely heard it. She was looking at Marcus, at the boy who couldn't hear but saw everything that mattered. He signed 3 words, and she understood them perfectly. "We saved us." Later, as the sun set over the city, Shayla walked again to Marshall and 5th, the intersection where dozens of people had walked past a lost deaf boy, where a homeless girl had made a choice that rippled outward, touching lives in ways she was only beginning to understand. She stood at the corner, watching the light change, red to yellow to green, stop to caution me, and she understood that every moment offered a choice, to see or to look away, to act or to pass by, to recognize the humanity in a stranger or to let them remain invisible. The lasting legacy wasn't about her heroism or Marcus's survival. It was about the simple, powerful truth that every person mattered. Every child deserved to be seen, and seeing, truly seeing, was the first act of love.